we see this repeated cycle of like creating enemies and then saying that we are against the enemy, and like
Yes,
it's all a fear there.
the policy has been very consistent. The interpretation of this policy in the mainstream media has always been that U.S. policymakers are making mistakes. Okay, so the interpretation they always give you is, oh, you know, they fucked up.
Yeah.
They don't understand the Middle East. They don't know what they're doing. They're idiots. Uh, they're too arrogant. Blah 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 blah. But the hypothesis that says that they're making mistakes because they're idiots cannot predict and cannot explain. Well, first of all, it will not predict that the mistakes always go in the same direction. Stupidity has no particular direction. Okay, so you should be making mistakes in all kinds of directions if you're just an idiot. Um, but the mistakes are always in the exact same direction, right? They spend every time they direct policy in the Middle East, and they spend billions of dollars in trying to change geopolitical reality in the Middle East, right? The consequence is always pro-jihadi and anti-Israel, right? So the mistakes were made hypothesis cannot explain what has actually been happening. If you're always making mistakes in the same direction, right? If people are always making mistakes in the same direction, you should suspect that they're not mistakes. That the mistakes were made claim is just a cover for what they actually want to achieve. And here, that hypothesis is very attractive because the overwhelming majority of the US population does not want their own government promoting jihadism around the world. That's not what ordinary Americans want. So the US government cannot say to the US citizenry, this is what we want. This is what we're trying to do. We're trying to make jihadism grow all over the place and destroy Israel and invade Europe and invade the United States. They can't say that to American citizens. So when, as you say, 40 plus years of policy are consistently always making jihadism stronger, right? The explanation they have to give to the US citizenry is that they're making mistakes, because that's the only explanation that US citizens could accept for this sequence of policies, right? If US citizens, if tomorrow, Saturday, if tomorrow, US citizens everywhere, all over the United States, were suddenly to conclude that jihadism has been the policy of all of their governments over a period of more than 40 years, there would be a revolution in the United States. There would be a revolution. So they can't say that, and therefore the only option is to say we're idiots. We're idiots. But this is never the model that says that the most powerful people in all of recorded human history are idiots. That's not a reasonable model, because you're faced with a new paradox when you say that. You're saying that somehow people who can't even tie their shoes are the most powerful people ever. Well, if they're such imbeciles, how did they get so powerful? How do they keep their power? Right? That makes zero sense. So the hypothesis that does make sense is that these people are evil. In other words, they do not share our values. They're not Democrats. They're not interested in human dignity. They're not interested in human rights and modern democracy or anything like that. They're interested in power, and they've decided that the way to destroy democracy and increase their own power is to get these jihadis to destroy our Western countries, right? And for a lot of people, the evidence is becoming overwhelming that this is what's going on. I mean, I've been saying it for 20 years. When I started saying this over 20 years ago, it was very confusing to a lot of people. But lately, it's becoming a lot clearer because so many dramatic things are happening now that people are having trouble reconciling with the mistakes were made model.